Vice Chair Smith and Commissioner Cush, the ordinance requires actually, let me clarify what the parking is in the downtown area. For one-bedroom units, it's one parking space per unit, and for two-bedroom units, it's 2 parking spaces per unit. There is no requirement for guest parking.
There's no requirement in guest. If you have units down in Old Town, you aren't required to have any guest parking.
Commissioner Cush, that's correct.
Ha-ha, there's the problem. I mean, then, boy, that needs fixed. Because are we assuming these people are never going to have any guests? And are we assuming that the one-bedroom units are never going to have more than one car? I mean, no wonder there's a parking problem downtown. I mean, it does not take a brilliant person to understand this. So I'm very troubled by this. It's certainly not this developer's fault. He's meeting the criteria set by the city. The city's criteria are wrong. They need to be fixed. Commissioner Serena, your request is very timely. We need to address this issue now. We got a lot of stuff coming with a lot of parking, and I want to hear, I for one, as a member of this planning commission, want an explanation of why we don't need any guest parking. And all those guests, because people have guests, and what do? They park in somebody else's space. My wife is a community manager, was for a couple of years for Safari, next to the Mercedes dealership, and now she's community manager for Optima Kierland. Her number one problem, the thing she spends most of her management time on, is adjudicating guest parking. And people coming in and screaming at her because somebody's in her spot, or people screaming because I have company coming, I made $1 million for my condo, and my guests have nowhere to park. The reason this is happening is land, I'm a developer for many years, land in downtown Scottsdale has gotten so expensive. In order to make a deal work, a developer needs to cram 10 pounds of potatoes in every 5-pound sack. And the parking goes out the door when that happens. They get as many units as they can. Those units require parking, and they don't cover it. I would have liked to have seen this project with one less unit and a few parking spaces instead. But the developer would say, well, I'm paying so much for this land, I can't make a pencil with less than 6 units. Too bad. I think at some point the city's got to set some criteria, and in doing so, we'll solve this problem. We're not going to solve this problem continuing to approve these projects with no guest parking and anything less than 2 spots per unit. And that's one of the reasons that I kind of pressed to get that big case, because that's 30 units. This is only 6. So these people are going to park out on the street. That neighborhood doesn't have, well, let's see. I'm trying to picture if there's any restaurants within. Greg, are there any restaurants next door or nearby this particular property? I know that you got the Valley Ho across the street, and there's another condo project across the other side of the street. Is that correct?
Commissioner Cush, that's correct. I can't think off the top of my head if there's a restaurant nearby.
Because there are a lot of restaurants downtown, right? I mean, in this neighborhood. And they all have 1 or 2 spots, and all their people park out on the street. Pretty soon, everybody's out on the street, and there's nowhere for anybody to park. And I start to really understand why everybody in the gallery district is so upset, because they don't have enough parking. And I think we've overlooked this for way too long. And I think before we go much further forward on all these projects to come, we really need to take a look at the parking ordinance, and that needs to start with planning. I mean, I think that's our responsibility, not council's. It's our job to look at it, make recommendations to council, and then have council vote on it. So, I mean, I'll leave this on thing. I think that I will support the project. I'll support the consent agenda item. I don't think this is the case to make. It's too small, but it sure points to the problem.